Naging klaseng pagkakadi po sa kudar sa City meeting, may lago berkakal galit, may galit, doon mo mula tulang galit. Let us pray. Umur moda semaklapkan ewa hadis sudah malam hari kerja Ibrahim bermadam ada bela, mungkin ada orang belum setia, Ibrahim open yang berubah, masih yang berubah, le إذا ورنا الغاو لجلتي ربعا مركل conference room West Plaza nama Dios bagi brand mother single CEO NDBP mga kamabro staff ng asetyang mga adra board yung brand bonite rubala se tiral attendees ng nartia kung sabihin open na rin narti mga suite more men sa igil ko na ay sa CEO yan mga karir rubag ibo sa amal lobabo do mapagtigal rin ang awin sa alam ng Dios Lupa lagi paling mereka sulit mereka kalau mereka kapsige, mereka lomreng lupa kalau sen mukli sila tengah, kamla bless, mukli sila tengah, dia baru lase eta Dios. Mereka di mereka sulit mereka kanda claim, mereka di motor kra oleh ten meeting mereka mengalir, mereka lase eta mereka kau, mabukti mereka kau, wisdom mereka eta Dios, nama bangga mereka. Wala wala lupa lagi mati mereka sulit muna isoy so ni tayang mulo bakla lagi tayo ng Yesus ang naging sobrang moral. Amen.
Well, good evening, everybody. I've got more wires coming out of me than one of those US Secret Service agents, so I hope you can hear me well enough. Thank you for joining us this evening. Great to see you all here. For those that this is their first time here, we've been trying to do these semi-annual outreach programs really to show that the bank is part of the community. We're not bankers that sit in an ivory tower. We're out in the community telling you what we're doing, but also listening to what your issues or concerns are. So really for the next hour or so, I'll be presenting hopefully some interesting topics, and I've tried to make it just a little bit fun because I know banking is incredibly boring. And then at the end of it, we'll open it out to a Q&A. And I thought the best place to start is here. This is me just 2 months ago in March in a country called Liechtenstein, which is a very small country in Europe. It's about 40,000 total population, so roughly twice the size of Palau. And as you can see, in March, it's still winter in Liechtenstein. I'll explain what I was doing there a little bit later in the presentation. But wherever there's snow, there are these things called avalanches. And it's a good place to start because I have an avalanche of information to give you tonight because this program is running a couple of months late. So for those of you that have never experienced an avalanche, and I know we don't often get snow avalanches here in Palau, I thought I'd just give you an indication of what an avalanche looks like. Can you see the screen, by the way? Should we? Here's an avalanche that came in a country called Kyrgyzstan when some people were hiking. Everybody was safe and sound, but this is what a snow avalanche looks like. So for those of you sitting in the front row, you now know what to expect over the next hour. We're going to cover 6 topics in all. First area I want to talk about is what we're doing to support businesses in Palau. The last couple of presentations, I've spent a lot of time talking about personal loans. Now I'd like to just switch the focus to talk a little bit about the business activity. We're going to talk about some assets that the bank has for sale. I want to talk about the importance of making sure the bank has enough cash so that we can make the loans that the community needs. I'm going to talk about commemorative coins. You may have seen some press articles about commemorative coins recently, so I'll talk a little bit about commemorative coins. I'm going to talk about the fact that we're upgrading our computer system, just very briefly. And finally, I want to introduce this term that maybe you've not heard very much about, tariffs. But it's something that is happening in the broader world, and I think it's important that we just raise people's awareness of tariffs and the impact on Palau. So let's start at the beginning, talking about businesses and what NDBP is doing to try and help the business community. Start with the good news. Over the last 12 months, we've put in place a program to try and reduce our interest rates across a range of products. So we started with our home equity loan program, which is available both for personal loans and businesses. We cut the rate by 1% to 9%. We cut first-time mortgage rates to 7%, which is the lowest rate that's ever been available in Palau. We cut our regular mortgages from 10 to 9%. We cut fishing loans down to 7%. And now the latest one that we've just implemented, with effect from the 1st of May, we've cut our commercial real estate mortgages from 10 to 9%. And that applies not just to new applicants, but also existing borrowers. Now, I know one of our friendly SOE sisters is increasing the charges for us in the community. We're doing whatever we can to try to bring our interest rates down, because I know cash is always tough for everybody. So that's good news. And also just, you're very fortunate because I've been able to obtain some exclusive video which allegedly shows what's been going on in the bank over the last 12 months. So this is a staff employee handing out interest rate cuts wherever we can find. The second thing to cover is what took place with the budget bill at the end of the 2024 year. In there was extensive discussion about what could be done to support businesses that had struggled during COVID. And during my time here, which is 18 months, this was the most heavily debated bill that I've experienced. I think I made 3 different proposals in terms of how we could apply this forgiveness. Heavily debated in the Senate. Ultimately, there was a particular element in the Senate that wanted to prioritize especially tourist boat owners and the fact that they had suffered during the loss of tourist traffic in COVID. And so this program has now been implemented. The bank forgave 75% of past due interest and penalty fees for 17 borrowers that qualified under this program. I know many business owners were hoping that it was going to be wider than this. Ultimately, the bank just had to follow whatever the decision was from your elected representatives in the Senate. But that's been completed, and I know certainly those borrowers that have benefited were extremely grateful. Also, something that I keep talking about, I keep promising, I'm really hoping to be able to finally deliver it. We already have a program for residential loans for solar. We're imminently going to launch a program for non-residential locations. And when I say non-residential sites, it could be premises that are rented out. It could be a workshop or a warehouse. It could be a church. Any building that is anything other than a residence will qualify for a subsidized loan at an interest rate of 5.5% over 15 years to install solar equipment that is tailored to that location. The residential program, it's a specific kit that's applied to the house. With the business program, it's designed for your particular site. So hopefully, Once PPUC finalize who are the approved suppliers for this equipment, we can launch this program, and hopefully we can get the benefits for businesses in the same way as residents are already benefiting. Here's the existing program. For residents, it's 4.5% over 12 years. So if you've not taken advantage of this program yet, please seriously take a look at that one. Another area that we're trying to help businesses is on the construction side. Now, for those contractors who try to bid for projects from CIP, they have to put up something called bonds, in effect guarantees that they will perform in the way that they're supposed to. And that is something that is handled by the bank in return for a fee. But in the past, this has been a very significant burden on contractors. And so there's now a proposal, which NDBP is very supportive of, to reduce the bonding burden on contractors. So the proposal is that going forward, if the project from CIP is less than $250,000, there will be no requirement for any bonding. And any project less than $500,000, if it's a local contractor, CIP has the ability to reduce or waive those bonding fees. If it's a foreign contractor, they'll have to pay the full fees. The existing law, which is an old law, also requires that contractors submit up to 200% of the project cost in bonding at times. So the new proposal is to be far more realistic and bring that down just to 100% of the project cost. And then I've also proposed that as CIP makes stage payments, though partially those bonds are released so that contractors can begin to start work on a new project. So the whole theme of this is to try to support local contractors to be competitive, winning more bids against hopefully foreign contractors, to support the local construction industry. NDBP loses revenue because we don't issue as many bonds, but that's insignificant. I'd much rather support the local contracting industry. Now, with business, you may think it's simple. Let's just cut the interest rates as low as we can, and that's the only important thing. But the reality is that sometimes, if the pipe work is very convoluted in an economic system, you can't just rely on cutting interest rates. You actually have to get under the hood and start straightening out some things that really aren't working properly. And so I've been working on a few technical issues to try to improve the performance of the business sector in Palau. And let me cover some of these. There we go. The first idea is something that is already done in Europe. What they found in Europe is that the big, strong, powerful companies were taking advantage of the small suppliers. And when a supplier was providing some equipment to a big company, the big company was delaying the payment of the invoice. So they put in place a law that said, no, that's not right in Europe. And hopefully we're going to replicate that here in Palau. In effect, the way it works is if a big company pays an invoice late to a small company, the big company is forced to pay interest on that late payment. So it's just trying to level the playing fields to make sure that the small guys can compete just fairly with the strong guys. That's the first change. Then there's a series of changes that we're trying to introduce to address something that I talked about at the very first outreach that I did 12 months ago. And I showed this slide then, which is an image of what I think is taking place in Palau, where foreigners are coming to Palau, taking advantage of cash in Palau from Palauans' pockets and taking it offshore to Guam and Hawaii, instead of that cash being recycled into the domestic economy. Now, I talked generally about it 12 months ago. Here are the specific numbers. So I'm talking about the big American banks that are operating here. Bank of Hawaii, for example. These are FIC numbers. Bank of Hawaii, had, at the end of the year, $269 million of deposits in its Koror branch. Bank of Guam had 88 million, Bank Pacific 21 million. So total deposits, these are deposits from government, from NGOs, from charities, from businesses, from personal people here, foreigners and locals, $378 million in these three banks. And yet look at how little of that money is put back into the Palau economy. These percentages are incredibly low. Normally, they would be at about 80%. So for Bank of Hawaii to be only relending 3% into this economy is simply not sustainable. And in fact, I went to Hawaii, talked to the bank. I've also flown to Guam and talked to the banks there. And what I've explained to them is I view this as the equivalent of illegal logging in the Amazon jungle, where businesses come to a country and take away the resources of that country for their own benefit. And in the same way as the world is trying to stop the environmental damage that is taking place in the Amazon, it's very important for Palau that we change this practice, that we make sure American banks are offering the good services that they do in Palau, but recycling those deposits for the benefit of Palau. At the moment, what's happening is Palau is losing the oxygen from its economy to operate because we don't have the cash to reinvest. Now, in fairness to the American banks, it's not all their fault. The reason that they're doing this is because of some outdated regulations and rules that we have in place in Palau. And that's something that we have to take ownership of ourselves and remove those excuses so that the Americans really have a reason to lend back. And that's what these changes are intended to do. So the first change is, at the moment, we have a cap on the maximum interest rates that banks can lend to businesses. The idea, I can understand. We're trying to protect our businesses being overcharged by banks. The reality is, banks are saying, we can't make a profit if we lend at those low rates. So legally, the proposal is to lift the maximum interest rate on business loans to the maximum level allowed for lending to individuals, which is 18%. The idea is to remove the excuse, to stop American banks saying the interest rates are too low. We just cannot make money if we lend in Palau. The second thing we're trying to do is American banks say, well, even if we can make loans, we don't know who is risky and who is not risky, because the small businesses here don't issue audited statements, audited financial statements. So how do we know whether they will repay the loan? So the proposal is to say that if the borrower approves, lenders can apply to the Revenue Department for a copy of the borrower's tax returns. If the borrower doesn't approve, they won't be able to get access to the tax returns. But if the borrower approves, the banks can get a copy of the tax returns. That, again, removes the excuse that banks can't assess risk. If they see the tax returns, they can assess risk. And then there's one final proposal. The FDIC is the US regulator, and in the US, there's a requirement that US banks reinvest into their local community. Now, for Bank of Guam, Bank Pacific, Bank of Hawaii, they are reinvesting into their local community in Hawaii and Guam. It's just they're not reinvesting here in Palau. So our idea is to replicate that existing US regulation and apply it to the American banks here in Palau and say, please, treat us in Palau the same way, in the same manner as you yourselves are treated in the US, in Guam, and in Hawaii. If we put all of that package together, I'm hoping that we will begin to see a change, and the American banks will begin to service this community in a more rounded way than they do at the moment. Okay, assets for sale. Whenever borrowers run into difficulties, the first thing that we try to do is just sit down with them and try to work out a new repayment schedule. So the last resort for us is always this, which is to foreclose on assets. But unfortunately, there are times where we just can't figure out a way to reschedule repayments, and ultimately we foreclose. So we are in the process of auctioning 2 land plots that were foreclosed more than 10 years ago. They've been sitting in the bank's books, not doing anything. These are small lots, probably taro patches, in Koror. Access to these sites is difficult, so as long as people are aware of that. But we will be holding an auction, and for those of you either in the room or watching on YouTube, if you're interested in bidding for these sites, do let us know, and come to the bank and we will provide more details for you. Similarly, we're selling off a Toyota car and a cabin cruiser, 27-foot cabin cruiser as well. Exactly the same process. If anybody is interested, please approach the bank and we'll give you the details as to what the auction process will be. Now, on to the next topic, which is the importance of cash for NDBP. As you likely know, NDBP does not accept deposits. So all the money that we lend out comes from 2 sources. One are the repayments we receive from existing borrowers. So as people repay old loans, we recycle that cash back into new loans. The second way that we get cash is by borrowing from the Republic of Palau, which itself borrows from international entities. Now, right now, because the bank has been so active in lending programs, we are very constrained on how many new loans we can issue. And what I wanted to do with this section of the presentation was try to put some context around the importance of decision-making in Palau, and especially about the pace of decision-making in Palau. I know we're a proud, traditional community, but one of the things that's important to recognize is how quickly the world around us is changing. I don't know if you can see, but up here, there's a man standing by the old steam engine. That man is the same man who's standing next to the very high-tech, high-speed train. It's 26 years apart between these 2 photographs, and this is China. And in fact, in the space of just, 12 years, China built more than 35,000 kilometers of high-speed rail track. Now, imagine all of the political decisions, the laws, the regulations, the permits, the building approvals, the land acquisitions, the design, the construction, everything that's required to build just one track. China have done this nationwide, and it's just an indication of how quickly countries can change. Now, you may say, yeah, but David, China's a centrally run government. It's easy for them to make decisions. Well, the thing is, this is happening elsewhere in the world. This is Singapore. The top picture, I moved to Singapore in 1999. So the gray picture is how Singapore looked when I first lived in Singapore. The picture at the bottom is how Singapore looks today. Okay. This is just 25 years difference. Mumbai in India. Now, if there is one country that has the most complex legal, ethnic, religious structure in the world, it is India. But Mumbai has gone in 17 years from the top picture to a metropolis with huge skyscrapers and huge highways. Now, my point here is I don't want Palau to look like Mumbai. I think it looks incredibly ugly. I don't want to see tall skyscrapers and lots of highways and lots of railways. My point is how quickly decisions are taken and enabled in these countries. Another example, I moved to Dubai in 2006. This is how it looked in the top picture when I moved to Dubai. And here we are, Dubai today, 20 years later. And even my home country, this is London. Now London, with all of its tradition, in fact, I don't know if you can see, but the towers with the flag on it, that is the Tower of London. And that's where the crown jewels are kept. That castle was built in 970. Okay, so that building is nearly 1,000 years old. And yet, even in London, you can see in 25 years, the scale of the city has changed dramatically. So the point is, Palau is a small community. Yes, traditions are important for us, but a small community should be more nimble than some of these highly complex cities and countries that we're seeing change so rapidly. And against that context, I wanted to talk about the Saudi loan. Now, the Saudi loan is something that was first discussed more than 12 months ago. This is a $15 million loan that the Saudi Fund for Development offered to the Republic of Palau with an intent for the ROP to lend to NDBP for us to use to finance affordable housing in Palau. Now, there are some things that everybody agrees on. And one of those things is that Palau desperately needs affordable housing. We need it for the community. We need it for the children in the community who are leaving Palau because they simply can't find an affordable place to live. So the need is very clear. The money is available. But for some reason, in the 11th OEK, there was no decision taken by the end of the term. And then this bill was represented in February. It's been adopted by the House of Delegates, and it's still in the Senate. No decision taken. And just again, to give you some context, the 11th OEK passed 40 bills in 4 years. Now, the OEK passes joint resolutions and does a lot of other work, so it's not just bills that are done. But on average, the budget for the OEK on an annual basis was about $6 to $6.5 million during that 4-year period. So on average, there were 10 bills passed a year, and an average cost for each bill of about $625,000. The 12th OEK, obviously the budget has gone up because we have a larger number of senators now. So the budget is now $8.3 million, roughly about a third increase from the annual budget in previous years. And so far, the OEK, 12th OEK, has passed no bills. Now, again, you're very fortunate because I've been able to obtain some exclusive video of exactly where the Saudi loan is in the Senate, allegedly. Here it is. Okay, so I'm having a bit of fun. I don't really think it's stuck in a box marked the US Army, but you get the idea. It would be nice if we could have a decision taken, because the big message here is no decision is a decision in itself. If we want affordable housing, we need the funds to build affordable housing. The funds are being offered. Palau just needs to take a decision. Do we want this loan or not? But please, don't allow this decision not to be taken. Say yes or no. Don't sit on it. Okay, commemorative coins. What are they, first of all? I have one in my pocket. I don't always carry one around. This is a commemorative coin. You won't be able to see it from all the way back there, so I'll show you some videos later, but this is what they look like. They're not the kind of coins that you put in the laundrette. Okay? They're not quarters. These coins typically are made from silver or gold. And they're used as collectible items. Some people collect paintings, some people collect wine, some people collect cars. Some people collect these coins and display them on their cabinet at home. They're not coins that you would use on a day-to-day basis. And that's the reason that I was in Liechtenstein, because Palau has a long history of involvement with commemorative coins. So you will find out in the market where people buy and sell these items, there are a lot of coins marked Republic of Palau. Now, it's a long story. In fact, I would need one of these to be able to explain the whole background to commemorative coins. Unfortunately, I don't have a time machine, but the story goes back 30 years. When NDBP first entered into an arrangement with a Japanese company at that time to design and print coins that were sold to the market, and NDBP received the benefit. Now, this is what the law says. The law says that NDBP is the only authorized entity to be involved in commemorative coins. It's very clear. And yet, somewhere along the lines in the early 2000s, this program derailed. And NDBP stopped being the beneficiary of the coins that were being distributed. And because I don't have the time machine, I can't go back and fix the past. All I can do is fix where we are today and fix it so that we can move forward. And so I was in Liechtenstein basically negotiating a new commercial agreement to make sure that NDBP got the benefit of the money it should have received over those last 20 years, as well as got an agreement as to what money it will earn as a minimum going forward. And the agreement is that if the company that is designing and issuing these coins, if they produce more coins than expected, we get more money. This is just the base minimum of what we will receive going forward. The House of Delegates passed this resolution earlier this month. The Senate has yet to make a decision on it. And the point about this is it's a commercial agreement. Whilst countries can take time to make decisions, private sector businesses don't. So there is a time limit around this commercial agreement. The private company is already issuing these coins for other countries. They do it for Cook Islands. They do it for Mongolia. So there is a risk. If Palau doesn't make a decision, yes or no, quickly, the company will say, we don't have enough time to waste, we'll move on, we'll use these coins for Cook Islands. So I do hope that the Senate will make a quick decision about this. Again, yes or no. It's the senators are your elected representatives. I'll let them make the decision, and I will follow whatever they decide. But what I've done is tried to get this program back on track for the benefit of the bank so we can take that money and make the loans back into the community. And just to give you a flavor as to how detailed and intricate these coins are, I'm going to show you a few clips of the coins. And you'll see that one of them weighs 1 kilogram. So the coins come in different sizes, silver, gold, but here are some examples of them. So there we are. As you can see, they're incredibly detailed, incredibly finely minted. The mint that I did the due diligence on in Munich is probably the best mint I've ever seen. So Palau can be proud of the coins that are being designed and printed. One of the arrangements I've agreed with them is, as you can see, there's very little connection to Palau in these designs. And there's a good reason for that, because most of the buyers are in Europe and the US, and so their taste is a little different to what we would have here in Palau. But I've agreed with the company that going forward, we'll have more of a say, just to make sure that the designs are something appropriate for Palau, not necessarily specifically related to Palau, but at least we have more control over the kind of designs for the coins. Anyway, I just wanted to explain commemorative coins. If you see any more articles in the paper, this is what about, and we're just waiting for the Senate to decide whether this program goes forward or not. And just one final comment, thanks to Special Prosecutor, who is the person who has done a lot of background work on this matter, and independently is working to address some of the historic issues around this program. Okay, just two more issues to cover, and then we can open it up. Just very quickly, We have decided at the bank to invest in a new upgraded computer system. We did a tender, went out for procurement, and we've chosen to go with a company called Temenos, which is a Swiss company, one of the biggest providers of banking systems in the world. The point about this company is that they provide systems for small banks as well as large banks. They deal with 41 out of the top 50 banks. And in total, as you can see, there's 8 billion people on the planet? Well, 1.2 billion of those people have a bank account that is run on a Temenos system. So they're a huge company. Why are we doing it? Well, our existing system worked well at the time, but it's a little out of date. And you may well remember that recently we were subjected to a cyber attack. We didn't lose any data, but one of the benefits of this investment is it's far more resilient to cyber attack. Over and above, we'll be able to offer, hopefully, a wider range of products and services for the customers going forward. So it's a long-term investment. This is an ongoing program for 5 years. We'll start the kickoff session internally in the bank for training, user acceptance, testing, etc. starts in a couple of weeks' time. But a big decision, and thank you to the board for their positivity about the team and supporting us on this complex investment. In essence, we're going from black and white to hopefully a new modern system. And then, just to wrap up, I wanted to talk about this term tariffs. I don't know whether you know what tariffs are, but in the international markets right now, this is the most common word that is being discussed because it has implications worldwide, and Palau will be no exception. So whilst my responsibility is to talk about the bank and to give you an update, I think it's also my responsibility just to raise awareness across the community as to some of the things that may impact us. So what is a tariff? A tariff is essentially a charge that one country applies to imports. And it's calculated as a percentage of the price of the item being imported. And the person who pays the tariff is the importer. Okay? The importing company pays the tariff in order to get the container out of the dock and into its warehouse. You may hear politicians describe it differently. Certain politicians like to explain it in a different way. The hard reality is the importer pays the tariff. Now, in February, the world changed because the USA launched what is called a trade war. They started applying tariffs to imports from many different countries, from Canada, from Mexico, from Europe, but especially China. So what you can see here is the blue line is the percentage tariff that the US has been applying to imports into the US from China. The red line is the response from China. What you'll see is, 1st of February, the US applied a 10% tariff on imports from China. China didn't respond. In fact, China only responded the 2nd of April as the US started ramping up the tariffs. And we then had a tit-for-tat program. Ultimately, the US reached 145% as a tariff on imports. So if an importer was purchasing something for $100, they actually had to pay $245 to get that item out of the dock. Now, as you can imagine, this has created absolute chaos. And if you think about this, vessels leaving China to go to US ports, even if they go to the West Coast ports, it takes anywhere between 18 to 25 days for the big container ships to go across the Pacific. So what it means is that ships were leaving China assuming there would be no tariff. When they arrived in the US, suddenly there was 145% tariff. And when you make a change like this, it has an immediate impact in ways that are hard to foresee. And the best way, I think, to describe it, and just to explain, sorry, at the moment we're in this phase where there's a 90-day temporary agreement. So the US has agreed to lower its tariffs to 30%. China is charging 10% on imports from the US into China. But remember, 30% is still, it was zero. On the 31st of January, it was zero. So it's still a 30% increase on goods being imported into the US. And this idea of, we see the impact spreading in unforeseen ways, the best way I thought was to describe it as what happens when you break glass. The glass shatters. You don't know exactly how the glass is going to shatter, but you can see the effect spreading out. And that's really what we're seeing, because from an exporter's perspective, if you're in China and you're supplying goods to the US, what are your choices now? Well, one option, which is illegal, but one option would be to change the description of the item. You can just say, oh, this isn't really an auto part. This is something that shouldn't be charged a tariff. Or they could say, oh, we haven't really exported this from China, we've exported it from Vietnam, where there's a lower tariff. Or they could just say, this is ridiculous, we're not going to sell to the US anymore, we'll dump our product into the European markets. Or, and this is what the US is hoping, they'll say, we'll relocate our factory from China into the US. Most have yet to even consider whether to do that. If you're an importer, what are your choices? Well, you have to recover the tariff. So the obvious thing to do is to raise the sales price to recover the cost. Or you can try to find a new supplier that isn't from China. Or you can simply stop importing. And if you're a consumer, what are the choices? Well, you can either panic buy, stock up on toilet rolls before the price goes up, or you try to find a local supplier. And the interesting thing about this, and this is one of those unforeseen impacts, when people try to find made in US products, let's say a car. If you want to buy an American car, you buy a Ford or a GM. There was a survey done recently, and actually the percentage of local manufacture in American brands is lower than a Kia or a Toyota, because Toyota has a factory there, whereas the American brands get a lot of their parts from Mexico as well as China. So it's very hard to actually find what is a true locally produced product. I saw a picture the other day of a sign which said, made in the US, and on the back was a sticker, made in China. So the point about this is I wanted to raise our awareness, because if all of this is taking place in the US, and if most of Palau's products are sourced from the US, we have to expect some kind of impact. And this are the latest forecasts for the potential price increases for products in the US. So we should expect some kind of impact here in Palau. This is an Eastern African proverb. It says, when two elephants fight, the grass suffers. Unfortunately, Palau, in this case, is the grass. And we just need to be prepared for the potential changes, which may be a lack of product on the shelves. You may go and look for something that you've always bought before, and it's just not available because it's not being imported to the US. Or you go and look for it, and it's much more expensive than the last time. Okay? I don't want to be doom and gloom, but I just want to be pragmatic and be open that this is a real risk for Palau. And then I'm going to close on the thing that is keeping me awake at night, and that is the US economy. The US government has a total debt of $36 trillion. Now, bankers are good at numbers, but I can assure you, even I struggle to imagine what a trillion looks like. There's just too many zeros. So the way that I try to translate it, I try to translate it into seconds. Let me explain. 1 million seconds is equal to 12 days. Okay? 1 billion seconds is equal to 32 years. 1 trillion seconds is equal to 31,708 years, which means that 36 trillion seconds is equal to 1,100,000, etc. years. In other words, if the US government today said we will start repaying $1 of our debt every single second, it would take them more than 1 million years to repay the debt. Now, in the past, the US has always been seen as this is not a problem. The US can just print as many dollars as it likes. It doesn't matter. But right now, the market is changing. And what people are also seeing is that the US confidence amongst consumers is very low. The construction industry, the index there, is at its lowest that it's ever been. And the US is also deporting a lot of illegal immigrants who were the key source of labor in the agricultural sector. So when you put all of this together, there are some flashing warning signs around the US economy. And again, because the US economy is the biggest in the world, that will have ripple effects in the same way as tariffs. So, I hope I haven't given you indigestion from your meal, but I did just want to make sure that we begin to raise the awareness in the community of these bigger issues that are taking place around us. And there was a show that I used to watch as a kid called Hill Street Blues. It was about a police precinct. And the sergeant at the police station always used to do a talk to the team as they were going out on the streets, and he always used to close it by saying, "Let's be careful out there." And I think that's probably the best way that I can sum up what I see in terms of the international markets. We just need to be very careful out there. And with that, I've covered the 6 topics for you, okay? So we talked about help for businesses, selling some assets, getting some cash for NDBP so we can make some more loans. We talked about commemorative coins, a system upgrade, and these things called tariffs that you should probably know a little bit more about. Thank you for being so patient with me tonight, and it's been a great enjoyment to see you all here. Thank you so much. So, any questions, or have I frightened you all to death?
Back a near commemorative coin, it's showing that the company agreed to pay $1 million upfront. Is that based on some kind of contract executed before? Is there an existing contract?
There is no existing contract with NDBP. There's some legal matters that are still outstanding that are not involving this company. But it means there's a limit to what I can say and sort of give you the information. But essentially, the $1 million would make sure that NDBP recovers everything that it would have otherwise earned over the last 20 years.
Follow up. So if there is, assuming the Senate would approve the bill, if it becomes law, it looks like there is a sunset clause on that. I mean, there's a tenure based on 3 years for 80,000, 3 years for, and so on, up to 10 years altogether. Is that something that you want to indicate in the bill or in the contract?
That's in the bill. So yes, it's in accordance with the law. The OEK have to approve this commercial agreement whenever NDBP enters into this commercial agreement. I actually think there isn't really a need for OEK to agree the commercial agreement. I think this is something that the NDBP board could handle. But that's the law, so we're following the law.
So it's safe to assume then that the law has a sunset clause on that. Is there an option to...
The law simply says if there is an agreement, a commercial agreement set, it is only legally binding if OEK agrees that agreement. So everything goes to OEK, and that's the decision maker.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I saw that as an opportunity for the bank to make more money and set to see if there's a sunset clause. Probably something that we can look into as citizens to push for that material.
Again, it's up to the Senate to decide. Yeah. Yes?
I have
Sorry.
a question on the tariff.
On the tariff, yes.
Yes. So I think Palau can import products from China.
Mm.
So is there an opportunity for Palau to export to US and not be charged on the higher tariff?
So the opportunity is for Palau to source product
From China?
from another country other than the US.
Yes.
So if Palau were to purchase goods from the Philippines, from Australia, from Taiwan, from Japan, there wouldn't be a tariff. But if Palau imports product from the US, which has been supplied by China, those products will increase in price.
No, my question is the other way.
For us to export.
Yes, to the US.
We can do that. The difficulty for Palau, of course, is that there's a limit as to the products that we produce.
No,
So-
we get it from China here, and from here to export. That's my...
Okay, so that was one of the examples I gave. So the Chinese suppliers are thinking, okay, can we take off our Made in China sticker and put on a Made in Palau sticker, and we can ship it via Palau. First of all, that's illegal under US legislation. But for sure, I have no doubt some businesses will try to find a way to navigate through these regulations. But no, I don't think there's a big opportunity for Palau to be a reshipment location for Chinese product.
You know, there's a lot of small business in the United States, in the retail industry, that sells a product, their own product, but it's manufactured in China.
Yeah.
It's a small manufacturing plant. That plant can come here. We get the raw materials here, make that product, and sell it to US.
Yeah, and that is one.
There's no tariff on that part.
There would be no tariff. You're quite right. It's
There's opportunity for small business here to operate a small manufacturing plant.
yes, there is.
That's my question.
Yes.
Like I keep hearing them, the cost is over
Yeah,
200%.
Yeah.
But they just need a small plant.
exactly,
Operate it here.
exactly.
So that's where we can get around.
It's good. We got some business minds going here. Yes, sir.
On the
Bonding, yes.
Is it restricted to local contracts or is it the federal, including SAMs? I don't know about the SAMs.
Sam?
System management for federal contracts.
So,
Being that we're getting an influx of budget from the States, from the US, would that be an initiative to take up for that local?
yeah. So this bonding requirement is actually driven by Palau's own law. It's called a procurement law, which sets requirements as to how CIP can tender for contracts if they're building a road or whatever it may be. And so this particular provision is trying to loosen the requirements for contractors. So it specifically relates to CIP contracts where local contractors are bidding for those projects under tender. Yes?
You're saying this $1 trillion US debt in way with the US economy. So you're saying be careful out there. So is that like a warning for us to look elsewhere or?
Well, okay, at the moment, the US administration is, how can I put it, rather volatile. So the policy changes are coming very frequently and very dramatically. So it's very hard to forecast what the next change might be. But because of that uncertainty, the international markets like to know what the rules of the game are. Once they know the rules, they can play the game. What terrifies the international market is when they don't know the rules. There's no consistency. Suddenly, you can put a container on a ship, and it arrives at its destination, and you suddenly have this huge additional charge that you hadn't factored in. So there is a lot of concern in the international markets about what the US might do next. And people are beginning to say, well, maybe I shouldn't do so much in the US, or maybe I shouldn't invest in US markets as much. Maybe I should just try to diversify and invest in Europe or other markets. And that's why there's so much uncertainty. Yes?
You mentioned that there's possibly limited resources with lending commercially at the moment. That's why you're looking for options. But what would be the requirements, for example, me and my family, if we wanted to borrow a commercial loan for a rental, like an apartment or a condo or a house for rent? And then what's the maximum amount? And if there's a collateral requirement?
Mm-hmm.
And if we can self-construct that type of investment?
Mm-hmm. So that kind of loan would be what I mentioned, we just reduced the rates on. So it's a perfect time for you to be asking that question. So the rate has just been reduced from 10% to 9%. And that loan would typically be for a commercial real estate project that you're leasing out an apartment or a house or something of that nature. In fact, the team here will be able to even talk to you about the particular need that you have. In terms of the maximum amount, that's dependent on the income projection from the business. So what we try to make sure is we encourage people to develop their own business, but we don't want people to overstretch themselves. So we never lend too much in case you run into some financial stress, and we want to avoid that. So there isn't a maximum amount that we lend, but we tailor the amount of the loan to the size of the project, but also the ability of the project to repay that loan. And the maximum tenor would be 20 years.
And are they able to self-construct them?
Yes, yes.
Would you require a performance bond?
So if you have no prior experience in construction, then we'd have to sit down with you and really make sure that you knew what you were getting yourselves into. But instead of going into details about your particular loan here in public, it's best that you come into the bank, let's sit down, and we can talk about your particular needs and see if we can help you. Okay? Yes?
About the commemorative coins.
Yes.
I know 20 years ago, or you used to have those that were issued by the bank.
Yes.
So, did you make money from there, and then what happened? Why did you stop?
So, in fact, we still have a few of those coins in our vault. We sell them for $45 each. I think they were produced back in 97 or 94, something like that. So if you'd like to look at those coins and see if you'd like to buy them, you're welcome to come into the bank. We still have a few. In fact, we sold some coins recently to a Taiwanese tourist who came into the bank and wanted to buy some of these old coins from the late 90s. The ones I've just shown you are the more recent ones that have been produced. Yes?
Do you still have loans that doesn't require collateral?
No.
Like microfinance?
No. And the reason we don't is it was a program that was launched before I arrived, but we found that there were a huge number of defaults. And the problem for the bank is we want to support the community, but if the bank is taking too large a loss, it's not good for the bank, and that means we can't lend to people going forward. So we took the decision to stop what was called microloans, these unsecured loans, and we introduced this new product, which is called home equity loans. The idea being that many Palauans have wealth, but the wealth is bricks and mortar. It's the value of the home or house that they live in. It's not cash in the pocket. So the idea of the home equity loan is to say, okay, we will lend against the value of your home so you can realize the value in terms of cash by this loan. And that's been a very successful program for owners of fee simple land, as well as people on state lease land in Arai. Unfortunately, KSPLA to date has not approved the ability of the bank to lend on state lease land in Koror. It's something we'd like to change, but at the moment, if you live in Koror, that program isn't available for state lease land.
What about out of Koror?
Outside of Koror, Arai and the two other states, which are Narad and Niwal. Yes, that's right. So 3 states in all, Arai, Narad and Niwal.
Not Peru?
No, unfortunately, not yet. Not yet. We'd like to. But the problem, I think, is if it's clan land, it's very complicated for the bank. Yes?
Okay, so a couple months ago I made a call to NDBP
Yes?
and inquired about the home equity loan.
Yes?
I was told it was closed. Is that something that is still currently closed, or is it open to put into application?
So the status on home equity loans is we launched it about 12 months ago in March, and it clearly met a need in Palau because in the space of, I think it was 3 months, and we made more than 3 million of new loans. We were so busy issuing these loans that we began to have a restriction on the available cash for new loans. So I took a decision where we temporarily suspended making new home equity loans to make sure that we had enough cash for the people who wanted to have a first-time home loan to move into their first house. It's a difficult decision, but I only have a certain amount of cash. I have to deploy it in what I think is the best way. So as it stands today, we have a waiting list for home equity loans of more than 100 applicants for a total of more than $4 million. And that's exactly why the Saudi loan is so important to us. If we had the Saudi loan, it would free up cash for me that I could deploy into home equity. But because Senate hasn't passed it, I have to have this waiting list, which breaks my heart to see people waiting for a loan from their own bank. But I just don't have the cash to be able to provide all the loans that are needed. The other thing I'm trying to do, obviously, is to get the American banks to help out the Palau economy and start lending more themselves instead of NDBP being, frankly, the main lender, other than perhaps a few flower shops or whatever it may be in the back streets.
So how are we going, so if anyone wants to inquire about the home equity loan, are you guys accepting applications?
Yes.
Or, because on a phone call that I had, I was like, we're not accepting any applications at this moment.
Technically, we will accept an application, but what I'm telling the team is just to be open with people. Right now, because it's more than 100 applicants, it's going to take, even if we had the money today, it would take us a long time to get through that waiting list. And we have to do it on a first-come, first-served basis. There's no other fair way to do it. So if you want to apply, you're more than welcome to apply, but just be aware, bear with us. We will try to get to you as quickly as we can. We just need to source this additional cash. There are 2 other major initiatives that we're working on, which I haven't even touched on tonight because we had too much of a program, the full program already. Maybe next time I'll have a chance to talk about those 2, which may give us some light at the end of the tunnel, but that's for the next outreach. Yes?
Sorry, so given that we're stretched on the home equity front, is there any available funds for the commercial?
For commercial, we're also trying to support because we know that small businesses are absolutely critical for Palau's economy. So again, we're just trying to prioritize what we think are the really important sectors. Let's get people into a house. Let's try and support the small businesses as much as we can. Yes?
I just have one comment. I saw that the fishing loan is 7%, but there's a lot of small business that would benefit from that rate. If you could look into that, because I see around a lot of foreign small retail shops, and it's difficult for the locals to get into a small retails with a 9%, 10%. So if you can sort of link it to that, you can help the Palauans to start their own small retail shop.
I wish I had a magic wand.
So that's just my...
Yeah, no, I understand. It's not just fishing loans. We also have agricultural loans. Aquaculture loans are also at 7%. So depending on the industry sector, we do try and prioritize. But if we were to bring down all of our business loans to 7%, the bank just we wouldn't have enough money to make those new loans. So as you can see, hopefully, over the last 12 months, we've been making clear progress to get our rates down. I'm going to carry on doing my best to get rates down. There's no guarantees, no promises, but that's what we're trying. We are aware that there's a need to bring rates down. Anything else? Yes?
Yeah, I want to mention about the solar.
Yes.
Yeah. Actually, is it still, a lot of people are having solar, but we hear these negative comments from the PUC, especially the CEO of PUC.
Yeah.
They said, actually, those people who are not using panels, are we subsidizing them? And I'm one of the, I have a solar. So it makes me kind of embarrassed when people see my solar. And I think you should talk to people from PUC. But I know they have to explain it to people. We didn't just come to NDBP to apply for the solar. We loan from NDBP. So we pay every month.
Yes.
But the negative things what we hear is, oh, we're subsidizing the people who have solar. And actually people who lives next to me are from PUC. So
I think
I see that it's still, you're still advertising it.
Yes. Yes, and we're still pushing the program, and it's still supported by PPUC. What Frank would say if he's here is the real issue is not this program. It's not NDBP. It's not the solar program that we're doing on residential and on business going forward. The issue is the mechanism or the charging mechanism that is in the law at the moment. And so I think PPUC are discussing with the Senate, and I know that's a whole different topic that I'll let Frank focus on, and I'll stay in banking. But it's a complex issue that PPUC have been working through, and it's obviously reflected now in these new rates, both on water and electricity, that have just started applying. But if Frank was in the room, I don't think he would frown and say, you're a naughty person because you've taken out a solar loan from NDBP. I think what Frank would say is that it's an issue for the Senate and the OEK to regularize this structure of payments. That's the core issue. So don't worry. Don't feel guilty. Enjoy the fact that you're saving the environment and hopefully getting a reduction in your electricity bills.
No, I just wish they're in the position they should make things more clear to people instead of come up with kind of negative comment. And because actually I live next to one of the manager, and she doesn't have solar, so she passed by my house and I said, oh my God.
Huh?
And last I heard her making comment about
So, well, if you give me her name and address, we'll try and convince her to get to get an NDBP solar loan, and then that will solve the problem. Okay, how are we doing? Anything else? All good? All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the food. Not too much indigestion from some of the difficult issues that we've covered. But the real benefit, hopefully, is to raise more awareness about what's going on at the bank. We're working very hard, and there's a lot of exciting programs ahead of us. So hopefully in 6 months' time, we'll be able to tell you a bit more about some of the other things at the bank. In the meantime, thank you, and we'll see you in 6 months. Thank you.